believe we are rolling. What is going on, you guys? Miss Lepar here, back again with another video, and I can't thank you guys enough for the latest what if of what if the Illuminati had defeated... Great. What if the Illuminati had defeated Wanda? I had so many requests to do this brand new, very interesting take. What if Gwen's death in The Amazing Spider-Man had affected Peter different? In this video, we're going to discuss so many different possibilities. I want to give a community shout out too. I'm pulling out the phone because we gotta read this big comment. Sir Windwaker. Make sure you go check out his channel, go give him a follow. He gives some really cool suggestions out. And if you guys would like a shout out, make sure you comment down below what kind of what ifs you would like to see or anything that you would like to see. Now if you guys are new around here, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with latest content. But anyways, take care, enjoy the video.
Since that spider baby has misunderstood me and tormented me, now it's my turn. I'm gonna obliterate you all!
In the analysis of multiple universes, even the tiniest detail is important for a fraction in the space-time continuum. It's powerful enough to create multiple realities. These realities exist side by side, eventually coming together to be known as the multiverse. Thank you. Only for a being is capable of seeing all of these universes coming together and understanding their complexities, and that being remains I, the Watcher. Grief remains a very powerful emotion. It is powerful enough to send you down a reluctant path, or it is powerful enough to open you up to the dark side. In one of the realities in the multiverse, I witnessed the death of a young Gwen, as her death was caused by another version of the Green Goblin, Harry Osborn. Even when the Green Goblin was defeated, Peter was unable to save Gwen, and her death traumatized him. In that reality, Peter Parker, who was later known as Peter 3, met two other variants of himself in another universe, and he finally forgave himself for Gwen's death, after saving a teenager named MJ in similar circumstances. Unfortunately, such good things do not take place in every reality. Today I will tell you the story of a reality where Peter 3 had dealt rather differently with the death of Gwen, an event that led him to discover more about the multiverse. It was one of the most intense fights Peter Parker had ever engaged in. He was battling his friend Harry as they clashed on different nuts and bolts in the watchtower. A distance away from them was Gwen, who struggled on her own, hanging onto a web, desperately praying for her life. Parker continued to engage Harry, but he could not keep his mind off Gwen. He was wise to not keep his mind off of her, as their fight kept on damaging the clock tower in the way they could not understand. At some point, they both got stuck on the clock mechanics. It was then Peter 3 realized the harsh truth. If the mechanics cut loose, they would destroy the web in which he had Gwen hanging on. She would fall subsequently if he did not do something now. To prevent that outcome, Peter 3 immediately began to hold the mechanics tight, as his combined efforts ended up restraining Harry as well, who looked at him, weak of course. However, as seconds passed, holding onto the mechanics was getting tougher and tougher. From where she was, Gwen could see that Peter was not doing so well, holding the mechanics in place. She held her breath as she considered the possibility at that moment being her last moment on this earth. Just as she had predicted, the mechanics cut loose, immediately cutting the web she was almost hanging on to. Peter and Harry fell to the side, with Harry falling unconscious immediately. Peter 3 turned and realized Gwen was falling several meters to the ground. The impact of such a fall would kill her for sure. He quickly jumped off, praying that he would reach her on time. At that very moment, I could only hold my breath and witness the moment once again, questioning my oath of non-interference. Peter 3 had shot a web at Gwen, who closed her eyes and smiled. Already resigned to her fate, Peter immediately caught a large rod. However, he was too late. His efforts were in vain. Gwen's head landed to the floor with a loud bash as she began to hang on the web, which had caught up to her. Peter 3 jumped down and looked at her. He touched her face, shocked at the fact she was unresponsive. He called out to her to wake up. However, she was completely deaf to his calls. It was then Peter realized the sad truth. He held on to Gwen, crying as he begged her to open her eyes, saying that he could not continue this journey without her. However, the death had been done, and there was nothing Peter could do. Gwen Stacy was dead. Peter Parker sat in his room. With tears in his eyes, he had not eaten anything for a while, and he did not plan on eating. Harry Osborn has been sent to Ravencroft, and now Peter just wanted to be alone. For a long time now, the news reports carried that Spider-Man had given up, and he was no longer active, which worried the citizens, but Peter 3 could not care less. As he sat in the room, he looked at the flash drive that Gwen had given him some time ago. He plugged it into the flash drive into his laptop, and was surprised to see Gwen's face pop up on the screen. It was her graduation message, and Peter contemplated whether he should watch the message. In a minute, he pulled out the drive and discarded it. If he watched the message, it would only force him to admit that Gwen was really gone. He wasn't ready for that. He needed to do something else. He needed to find a way to bring Gwen back. However, how could he do that? He thought of a million possibilities, but none seemed feasible in his head. Right now, he decided to blow off some steam, and he knew exactly how to do it. The little boy stood before the large mechanical rhino and pulled his Spider-Man mask. Behind the line, the police tried to restrain his mother. They didn't make any attempt to come and save the boy. Deep down, they knew that the boy was screwed, as the humans in multiple realities would say. Rhino laughed, approaching the boy. He was really going to enjoy ending the kid's life. He was surprised to notice Spider-Man had come to the scene. Standing behind the boy, Peter 3 looked at the boy's eyes and informed him to go protect his mother while he was going to deal with the Rhino. The boy did as he was told, leaving Spider-Man to face Rhino. Peter immediately warned Rhino to retreat or he was done, but of course, the Rhino was not going to say no. He immediately charged towards Peter 3. Peter 3 used webs to pick up the metal plates and began to swing it towards the Rhino. In a few seconds, the Rhino was on the floor, his mechanicalized suit destroyed. Peter 3 quickly picked up the man and asked him who sent him, as he knew such tech wasn't available to just anyone. The man begged for his life, identifying himself as Alexei. He muttered that he met with a guy named Gustave, and with that, Peter gave a punch in the face, knocking him out. Gustave walked around, admiring the several machines they had stored in the glass cells. He knew deep down that Harry would be very upset now that Spider-Man had returned, and throughout his plans, he hoped to go to Ravencroft Institution and try to reason with Harry not to flare up. He only hoped that Harry wouldn't go goblin again. You never take off that disguise. He heard a voice sighing behind him. He turned around, shocked to see Spider-Man. Peter 3 pulled out his mask and informed him that he knew that he was the gentleman and that he sent out the Rhino, and judging from the fact that there was a secret lair in the Oscorp company, Peter knew that Harry was involved in all of this. The gentleman smiled and began to speak about how he required balance. It needed people to live in fear of the unknown, now cowering at the mention of heroes such as Spider-Man. Casualties like of Gwen Stacy should have been a clear proof that heroes were not worthy of worship. But at this point, Peter's attention was on the alien life form, moving around in the glass containment unit. When Peter asked what it was, the gentleman noted that it was the next phase in human evolution. Peter 3 turned to the gentleman and told him that he had a counteroffer for him, one that he knew he wouldn't be unable to refuse. The gentleman smiled on hearing the turn of events. Harry was quite unsurprised to see the gentleman enter his cell. He had already heard of the Rhino's failure and Spider-Man's return. Now he needed to do something new. As he spoke, the gentleman cut him off sharply and informed him that he had things covered. He was going to find another person ready to take the mantle of killing Spider-Man. However, the gentleman asked if the symbiote in the containment unit was for a higher project or something. Harry noted that the symbiote needed to merge with someone to become what he dubbed Carnage. However, all test subjects died during the merge. With that, the gentleman handed over a cookie to him to eat and celebrate Spider-Man's demise in advance. Harry smiled, immediately stuffing the cookie into his mouth. The gentleman stood up and walked to the door, stopping midway. He said, "You know, you once thought I could save you from your illness. However, unfortunately, I ended up being the one to end you." And with that, Harry suddenly realized the man in the cloak was not the gentleman. It was Peter Parker. Harry looked at the cookie and began to hold his throat. Coughing, the cell doors opened, and the guards rushed to check on him, allowing Peter 3 the only opportunity to escape into the night. Parker continued testing every theory he could think of. However, as he struggled to do so, he noticed it was only getting worse. There was no solution or experiment that he could think of to bring back Gwen Stacy. As he sat in Oscorp's laboratory and turned to look at the symbiote, admiring it for a split second before returning to his work, the gentleman stepped into the room. Moments after, dressed in his usual black coat, he immediately informed Parker that he had changed his mind on the terms of their deal, and he needed to kick Peter 3 out of Oscorp. Peter flared up, noting that he had kept the terms of their deal and killed Osborn, allowing the gentleman to have all the rights to the Sinister Six project. The gentleman countered by noting that Peter had been killing criminals in his Spider-Man suit, and this had an effect on his potential clients. Therefore, he needed to determine if Peter was one way or another. The gentleman threw a knife towards Peter, and Peter ducked the knife, landing on the glass containment unit behind him. The glass had shattered immediately, and Peter 3 was shocked. The symbiote was free.
Some other dimension. It appeared. Peter's hatred, it bonded with him somehow and drove him completely insane.
It jumped on Peter 3, instantly merging with his anger and all of his emotions. The gentleman could not believe his eyes. Before him stood Spider-Carnage, but he was different. He was in a suit, but he looked different. He looked determined and ready to kill the gentleman. The gentleman took out a gun. Before he could react, Peter 3 sent a large sharp-pointed hand into his chest. The gentleman fell to the floor, motionless after that. Peter 3 smiled at the power he now possessed with his web shooters, agility, spider sense, and this new ability he would be unstoppable. He was now Spider-Carnage. Time with the Carnage symbiote was one of the best things Peter could ever ask for. Peter could hear the Carnage symbiote speaking to him, telling him to take a step back as he took a seat in the driver's seat. He had spent the past years visiting several criminals and taking equipment from them, killing them in the process. He would do anything to get Gwen back, and the Carnage symbiote had given him a solution. Right now, Peter 3 was working on a multiverse portal that would help him construct and help him enter the very fabric of space-time, allowing Peter 3 to go to another universe and find his Gwen Stacy. At this moment, the machine was finished. Parker pressed a button, and to his amazement, a portal opened. He stepped through it. Gwen smiled as she drank her smoothie. However, her smile faded once she saw Peter 2 and Mary Jane together. Gwen coughed a bit, immediately hating herself for being so vain. Peter 2 and Mary Jane were an amazing couple, and she had to accept that even if she liked Peter 2, and he didn't feel the same way. She was not going to let that be the reason she became a jealous thorn in their relationship. She was about to walk away when she immediately noticed Spider-Man swinging into the scene with people clapping. He felt his hands swoop over her and carried her into the air. Back on the ground, Mary Jane and Peter 2 were shocked at what just happened. Who was this other Spider-Man, and why would they need Gwen? Peter 2 immediately ran to the corner and slipped into his Spider-Man suit. He was going after this imposter. Peter 3 dropped Gwen on the floor and removed his mask. Gwen was surprised at the gesture, asking if she knew him from somewhere. She was more shocked when he kissed her. She pushed him back, upset and ranting that just because he was Spider-Man did not give him the right to harass another woman. However, she noted that his face began to shift a bit with the push she gave him. Who was this man? Just because he was Spider-Man. Or sort of. Peter 3 approached her, but immediately Peter 2 swung into the scene and began to fight with Peter 3, with Gwen watching in shock. During the fight, Peter 2 could not help but notice similarities to Peter 3, and that he had similarities to the Venom symbiote, an adversary that Peter had faced a long time ago. What on earth was going on? They fought for a pretty long time, with Peter 3 overpowering Peter 2. As he was prepared to land the final killing blow, a man called out to him, asking him to stop. Peter 2 immediately yelled for Ben to get out of the way, grabbing Peter 3's attention. Uncle Ben was alive in this universe. Peter 3 walked towards Ben Parker and pulled off his mask, breaking down into tears as he hugged the confused old man. After Peter 3 had explained everything, Peter 2 and Uncle Ben had volunteered to save Peter 3 in the next few weeks. They had gotten rid of the Carnage symbiote with great difficulty. Finally, it was time for Peter 3 to return home. As he prepared to step through the portal, he looked down from the buildings. He stood out to see Gwen entering a cab. He knew at that moment that he would always love her, but he had become a monster, and he had to make up for that in his home reality. He stepped into the portal, making plans to destroy the multiverse time-traveling machine. Gwen sat in the cab as it moved quietly. She didn't know why, but she still thought about the monstrous Spider-Carnage that she had encountered some weeks back. She didn't know why, but she felt as if she knew him. Destiny works in mysterious ways, the driver said, as he drove. When Gwen inquired why he said so, the man noted that he's seen so many timelines to understand that. When he noticed Gwen's confusion, he identified himself as he who remains, and he needed Gwen for something important. It is my fear that the multiverse war is still brewing. Deep down, I do not know if I must break my oath of non-interference again to protect the very fabric of reality itself. For if I do, I will need the help of Peter 3, and I will be forced to return him to the Spider-Carnage monster he once was.